Hi guys, this is Erica from Gokce Capital. Now before I begin, be sure to click subscribe and turn on the notification bell. In 1956, the waters of the Chattahoochee River began to flow over their banks. The old rhythm of the river's tidy ebb and flow ground to a halt, and the muddy waters fanned out into the fertile farmland of the North Georgia foothills, inching closer and closer to the region's towns as its crooked new path took shape. Yet the coming destruction was not the work of a storm or natural disaster, but the birth pangs of a new lake. For 5 years, the Army Corps of Engineers had planned this flood, and now the slowly rising water was taking shape into the largest and grandest lake in the state. Today, Lake Lanier provides recreation, water, hydroelectricity, and flood control for the city of Atlanta and the surrounding area. But the grand project came at a price. The waters of the new lake ate up farmland, forests, towns, and even cemeteries. And some say that the inhabitants of these old graves are less than pleased to have their resting place so disturbed. But more on that later. Before we cover the haunting of Lake Lanier, we're going to go over the steps for how you can build your own man-made lake. Number 1, first determine whether the project is feasible to begin with. Evaluate the soil on your land. We'll cover this in a little more detail later. Think about whether your land is in a low-lying area. It is easier to create a pond where water naturally wants to flow. What are the local land use regulations in your jurisdiction? Will you be permitted to build a lake given the zoning regulations on your land? Are there rules regarding the alteration of existing watersheds? Or will you be damaging the flow of protected waterways or wetlands by building your lake? And how much will it cost you to build the lake of your dreams? Is this feasible for you financially? Number 2, decide what your lake's purpose is and how you want to use it. It's very important to settle on this up front because the function of your lake will decide how you design it. For example, a fishing lake is going to take more time and effort to construct properly than an ornamental lake. Number 3, once you have decided what your lake is going to be used for and that it is feasible to build one in the first place, the first step in your due diligence is to evaluate your land's soil. While it is technically feasible to build a lake in almost any topography or ecosystem, not every soil type will support one. Clay is especially effective for ponds, while sandy, rocky, or dispersive soils are not ideal and will likely require you to bring in outside soil. Thus, your first step is to order a soil report so you know exactly what you are working with on your property and how the soils are going to impact your pond design. Number 4, understand the legal and physical landscape of your property. In determining whether the pond is feasible to begin with, you will have done some basic research, but at this stage, you will want to dive a little deeper into the specifics of your property. Know your property's watershed and annual rainfall so you can size your lake appropriately. The watershed is going to determine the size of your lake because if you build a lake that is too large for the existing watershed, you may have to manually pump in additional water. Whereas if you build a lake that's too small, you may have issues with flooding. You'll also want to site your lake appropriately. It is usually best to find a low-lying area that is already close to a waterway or underground stream and which has few trees. Trees can be an issue because they wick water away from the lake and their roots can damage the dams that you will need to construct to hold your lake's water in. And while you're figuring out the topography of your site, you'll also want to do some more research on the legal landscape. Research in more detail the regulations in effect. Determine whether you need to set back your pond from any existing creeks, streams, rivers, reservoirs, or other water sources. And understand what permits will be required to undertake your project. Number 5, find a geologist who can professionally evaluate your soil and land. This will be the person who gives you definitive say on what is feasible and what alterations will need to be done to your land in order to make your lake function properly. And you can reach out to the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service to see if they can connect you to the appropriate individual in your community. Number 6, around the same time that you're hiring a geologist, you'll also want to assemble a design team. This team may include a designer or engineer, your geologist, possibly a biologist if you want fish or wildlife in your pond, and a contractor. This team will then work with you to flesh out the design of your pond and put together the construction documents. The engineer and contractor will also help you pull any required permits. Number 7, once you have worked with your design team on the design and they have pulled permits for you, you can begin constructing your lake. Now, chances are you won't be constructing the lake yourself. A contractor will do this for you. But just so you have some familiarity with the process, here are the basic steps that you will go through. First, the contractor will clear and level the area where the pond is to go. They will build an artificial dam around the lake's perimeter to hold the water in, and excavate the lake bed. Once the lake bed is excavated, drainage infrastructure will be installed. This will usually involve installing a drainage pipe that will channel excess water to a set drainage basin. Keep in mind that you will need to set aside an area on your property not only for the lake itself, but for the overflow drainage basin. Otherwise, in the event of a heavy rainstorm, your lake may overflow its banks and cause flooding on the rest of the property. Once the infrastructure is installed and the lake is made watertight, it will be filled with water, and then landscaping, such as perennial grass, will be planted around the pond banks to prevent erosion. And it is at this point that you can introduce fish and wildlife cautiously if you plan to do so. And you can consult with your biologist on how to best do this. And finally, number 8. The construction of your lake is not the end. You will have to regularly monitor and maintain it if you want to ensure that it is healthy and productive. Man-made lakes often suffer from higher levels of algae productivity and rates of sedimentation, as well as water quality problems. So make sure that you consult with your designer, geologist, and biologist to determine how to properly maintain your lake. It's going to be an ongoing work in progress, so keep this in mind before you get started. But let's return to the story of Lake Lanier. Since its creation in 1956, the lake has become a recreational hotspot, but its success masks a darker story. The lake is infamous for its unusually high number of bizarre boating accidents and drownings. Boaters tell stories of capsizing after hitting something in the water, yet when they return to search for the offending object, find nothing of note. Swimmers speak of feeling as though they are being pulled beneath the water by an invisible force. And fishermen tell of seeing the figure of a ghostly rafter on cold autumn nights. Certain locals say the lake is haunted by all of those destroyed homes and buried graves. But of course, this does not stop millions from visiting the lake each year. And by all accounts, Lake Lanier was a success, producing nearly $100 million worth of renewable energy and preventing all but the most rare of flooding events in the region. So if Lake Lanier can persist in the face of the supernatural, there's no reason why you can't create your own fishing pond or backyard lake. Just make sure you don't cover any towns or graveyards in the process. But do you have any stories about building a backyard pond? Let us know in the comments. Did you like this video? You're going to love our Gokce Land Due Diligence program. We'll make you a land due diligence expert in just 7 days. Check it out at gokcecapital.com/glad. And while you're at our website, don't forget to explore our $1 down listings at gokcecapital.com/listings. Finally, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email, call, or text, and we will respond as soon as possible. So thank you for listening, and more to come.